Thank you for this nice introduction and good afternoon, everybody. So now from the river of Durham, we are moving to the Nile, another river. Sorry. This paper presents some of the results of the recent survey work carried out in the northwestern delta of Egypt at Kefr Ardawar province in April 2024. And the Delta Survey mission is part of the larger project, which is called Delta Survey Project, funded by the British Academy since 2007 through the Egypt Exploration Society. And Dr. Penelope Wilson, who is not here, from Durham University, is the director of this project, of the Delta Survey Project. And the main goals of the Delta Survey projects are to investigate and improve the knowledge of physical geography of the Delta in order to merge all the archaeological documentation with documentary and papyrus evidence, which is sometimes lacking, and to create a detailed data set for places where information is still lacking or it's not widely available, or where we spotted possible interesting ancient sites. And other goals of the project are to add a photographic record and provide information to improve the database of the sites in different regions for further studies and excavation, to monitor the current preservation of the sites of selected area, and to integrate and compare our data with other published or unpublished sources. And each site presents unique elements, so it's not possible to use the same methodology and the same level of investigation for all of the sites. And the activities carried out are mainly a site visit with a visual description, photographic record, with, where possible, the use of photogrammetry to map visible architectural and topographic features, to create a topographic map, to study and surface pottery, to provide information on the chronology of the site, a magnetometer survey of surface and subsurface details where possible, core drilling in order to understand the changing of delta landscape over the time. The Western Delta was an important agricultural, animal husbandry and wine growing area. And agriculture was the foundation of the ancient Egyptian economy and vital to the lives of the people of the land. And the agricultural practices began in the Delta region of northern Egypt and the fertile basin known as the Fayum in the pre-dynastic period, so about circa 6,000 before Christ, BCE. But there is evidence of agricultural use and overuse of the land dating back to prehistoric times, so circa 8,000 BCE. Thanks also to the early inundation of the Nile and to an efficient canal system and irrigation techniques. And irrigation canals were indeed necessary to carry water to outlying farms and villages, as well as to maintain even saturation of crops near the river. And since pharaonic times, the northwestern delta landscape was constituted by significant bodies of water, such as the lake Mareotis, as you can see here from the map, and Hedco, as well as swampy border areas of Lake Burullus, lagoons, and marshes. And the lakes were fed by waterways and tributaries, which offered excellent lines of communication through the field basins, swamps, and complex networks of water systems. And archaeological evidence from the areas of Mareotis, Abukir, Hedku, and Burullus, together with the river branch Canopus and linked waterways, such as the Khalig-Khenes canal, suggest that the waterway system and their location were essential and that this element played played a crucial factor in the network of producing and controlling goods from the place of production to urban centers. The settlements in the area were sustained by agricultural land and proximity to the waterway system. It is these networks from the Ptolemaic to late antique period, so from 300 BC to AD 700, that the Delta Survey Project aims to investigate by collecting information from the chosen sites to understand the dynamic of the waterway network and its support for the capital of the Ptolemaic reign, the newly founded city of Alexandria. Indeed, the foundation of Alexandria has the new capital and main port of Egypt at the beginning of the Ptolemaic period between 331 and 312 BC was indeed a strategic and political decision. So the survey of last April focused mainly on 6 sites, and the name, as you can see here from the map, Rumadnia, Abu Hafrita, Kom el Wak, Kon Beheira, Katimi, and Abu Hirets. All these sites are lying along the ancient Khalig waterway, which ran from east to west through the Western Delta to a basin attached to Lake Mareotis. The site of Kom Abu Humar, by contrast, probably lay on the parallel channel of the Canopic branch. And it's to be expected that most of the sites would show activity in the Ptolemaic period, as they are part of the Alexandrian hinterland of supply and production. But most of the sites had material, indeed most of the sites had material from this period, but 2 of these sites, Magadir and Abu Hirets, also had strong evidence for the presence of kilns manufacturing amphora. And so they could be used to contain wine that was perhaps grown nearby, though the survey noted that no wine basin in any of the sites. So for a long time, and several reasons, like the worse conservation, different climate situation, or a different landscape, the Delta area has been subject to less archaeological investigation than Upper Egypt in the south. So for this reason, for some areas in the north, due to the lack of the archaeological documentation, then the landscape has been investigated using epigraphic and textual sources, mainly belonging to priestly literature, which could help in the reconstruction of the ancient landscape. A fundamental textual source to draw on consists of a series of texts coming from the wisdom of the priest, who had the task of writing and editing texts relating to the cults and mythologies and sacred geography of a given temple center. And these compositions are important because they contain the theological information of a temple, a city, or an entire region, and introduce the feast, the priest, the name of local myths, but also sometimes geographic elements of a specific province of Egypt. For this kind of textual source, so the scholars have coined the name of cult topographical manuals. And these compositions were not only scribed on the walls of some of the main temples of the Greco-Roman times, but they were also copied on papyrus and most probably preserved within the temple libraries. And next to this composition, there are other texts referred to as encyclopedias or list monographs, which constitute a more synthetic form of the temple monographs, as they present in a more schematic way the elements of a given province. And the most organic and complete description is engraved on the plinth of the sanctuary of Edfu, of the temple of Edfu, better known as Great Geographical Text of Edfu. And the Great Geographical Text of Edfu is part of a more elaborate speech that the king Ptolemy IV addressed to the god Horu in the temple of Edfu. And this composition report synthetically the cultic and geographic elements that characterize all the provinces of the Egypt in the lower and in the upper Egypt, so in the north and in the south. So for each province, we have the name of the province, the main city, the regional specific titles, the name of the sacred boat, the name of the main god, but also other geographic information, such as, for instance, the name of agricultural territory, which is in hieroglyph called U, and the name of the marshland. So, among the known priestly literature, a distinct section deals exclusively with sacred geography. And this kind of texts are called geographical processions. And geographical processions are a rich source of information, especially when the archaeological documentation constitutes only a tiny part of the available documentation we have. The complexity and variety of information deduced from this test reached its peak in the Ptolemaic and Roman eras. And the processions generally consist of inscription accompanying long procession of people of male, female, or androgynous gender, known as figures of fecundity. And they symbolically represent the personification of district, of region, of or other geographical elements, and they are easily identifiable as their name or emblems usually appear above each character's head. And here you have some examples. A geographical procession presents a multiple variety of subcategories, and particularly useful for reconstructing the ancient landscape of the Western Delta are the so-called quadripartite procession and the procession of Peku. They are so-called because 4 fertility figures represent each province, and this typology is first attested in the temple at Edfu during the reign of Ptolemy the Eighth, while the last documentation is found at Medamund, so in the Roman period, during the reign of Trajan. And the 4 characters personify the 4 geographical entities that characterize each province and its territorial completeness. So we have the name of the province, which is in hieroglyph is Sepat, the canal, Mer, that brings to the province the water of the Nile, the agricultural territory, the Hu, and the Peku, a term that probably refers to the marshy and swampy terrain of a province. So, in some cases, the data acquired from the quadripartite procession can be supplemented with information from private documents from the pharaonic age, including the names of the canal, the agricultural territory, and the marshland of provinces of the Western Delta. However, all these tests reveal more discrepancies than concordances with fake geography tests, thus revealing a very complex framework. And these difficulties are due both to the presence of different names for each geographical elements, as well as to the scarcity of sources and the existence of numerous homonyms among the geographical topography of the delta. And the development in recent decades of archaeological knowledge of the northwestern delta region, thanks also to geomagnetic, geological, and geophysical surveys, such as the Delta Survey Project, has allowed us to learn more in detail about the landscape and function of the settlements along the canals and the network mechanism in which they were organized and operated. So, just a second.
Just keep it like that. Yeah. Okay. Now we're gonna talk about a little bit of the archaeology of the region. The path of the ancient Khalig Canal supplying the northwest delta can be detected in earlier survey maps of Egypt before the delta had been fully tamed. So this is before the construction of the high and low Aswan dams. Even in 1914, the southwestern part of the delta was full of small waterways, lakes which filled and emptied over the course of the year according to the annual inundation. Along the course of these waterways are the remains of hundreds of former small villages and larger towns, which are part of the landscape of production that was extremely productive during the Ptolemaic and Roman periods. The survey work by the Delta Survey Project of Egypt Exploration Society focused on the area along the western delta fringe in order to gather basic information about registered sites in order to investigate their chronological sequences, networks, and potential links. Many of the sites hardly survive and are under threat from agricultural and infrastructural development. Two sites are presented here, Tel Magadir or Maharin, to the west near Lake Mareotis, and Tel Hatimi to the east along what it seems to be a relict waterway according to some satellite imagery and map data. So the sites are these two, and I'm going to start with Tel Magadir. Tel Magadir has a high mound to the south and then a dock over and pitted area to the east and north. There is a track running across the site from north-south. The track divides the site into two main areas, both of which show evidence of pitting and disturbance, but also of archaeological features. The highest point on the southwestern side has clearly been cut away, as the western side is a sheer section. This part has a good coverage of pottery, kiln waste, and slag. The western fields, therefore, and the wasteland beyond may have been part of the site originally. One side note, most of these sites have been destroyed in the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century by a group of people called the Sabahin, which basically use the silt of all these sites to fertilize the Nile, because basically the sedimentation was not great after the construction of the low Aswan Dam. So the western fields, therefore, and the wasteland beyond may have been part of this site, but the high mound and its section contain a large quantity of pottery, including wasters, vitrified material, slag, and some few pieces of fineware and coarseware. So this is some views of the site. It's around 3 meters above the surrounding fields, but show areas of burning at the surface and in the cut-away sections. To the south, there is a canal running east-west along the south edge of the site, and the dredged material from the canal contains some pottery, especially on the western side. A drill core to the south of the site to a depth of 2.5 meters contain marshy deposits in the upper sequence and sandy material lower in the core, suggesting the presence of a waterway. To the northeast, there is an oxbow lake relict adjoining some further fields which were agriculturally unproductive. A core in this area highlighted mud brick structures founded on fine sand, probably Aeolian. So in more detail, the vitrified fragments of pottery suggest that the site seems to have had at least 2 kilns on it, producing a kind of amphora called Egyptian amphora II, Ptolemaic Egyptian amphora II, dating to the 3rd to 2nd century BCE. And it would be an important place for excavation in order to set it into its landscape context and related to the network of production and supply throughout the Western Nile Delta in the Ptolemaic period. A few shards of imported amphora were collected also, 2 parts of handles, maybe of a Rhodian amphora, and a rim of Cnidian amphora from the early 3rd century BCE. Now, the other side, Tel Hatimi, is a rounded mound with a square of northeast corner and is 140 by 170 meters, covering more or less 1.8 hectares. The main area of the site is a sandy mound in the south central area, with a ridge tailing away from it to the southwest and a further sandy area to the southeast. The most part of the site is covered by camel thorn, shrubs, and halfa grass, so it is difficult to note any surface patterns or features. In fact, there is so much material that it is difficult to escape the conclusion that the site is a kiln of some sort, perhaps within the sandy mound. Based on the types of sherds that are burned, vitrified, or attached to vitrified material, the kiln could be of Egyptian pottery II amphora, and most of the sherds on the site can be dated to the Ptolemaic period. We took some scanned readings over the mound, and there is a definite change in the relative magnetic readings from the track to the top of the mound. So in this case, the main mound is the most obvious archaeological feature, and it's about also 3 meters above the surrounding fields. And it's covered by a dense coverage of pottery sherds. It also includes vitrified brick, slag, and also some burned and vitrified sherds lying on the mound. The sample includes Egyptian amphora sherds, 2 rims of Egyptian amphora I amphora, and 4 rims of Egyptian amphora II amphora, in addition to handles and bases of amphora that were also difficult to be attributed to either type. All were locally made from alluvial Mareotis clay, which is the closest lake that we have shown, rich with limestone particles and fragments of shells. Additionally, at least 4 amphora stand fragments were found. A poorly preserved shoulder fragment of an Aegean amphora was found, connected to a part of a handle, and identified according to material and handle shape, which is marked in the photograph. A large fragment from a shallow dish or basin, a fragment from a rim of a cooking pot, and another from a deep plate were found. All of these sherds date to the Ptolemaic area, ranging from the 3rd to the end of the 2nd century BC. Although previous visitors to the site have described finding Roman sherds, in fact, we found only Ptolemaic material, and although there are some amphora types that might continue into the Roman period. So the key element here is the amphora. And the reason of that is because, well, we will get into that. But basically, if we see the older water channels and lakes that were still visible in the 1914 maps of Egypt, Kom Tel Hatimi, or Kom Hatimi or Tel Hatimi. In Egypt, they don't call them tels normally. They normally call them combs. So that's why we use both names. Appears to the west of a large flooded area that you can see in the image, but also on channels that have been successively canalized, perhaps from the Ptolemaic period until the 19th, early 20th century, when the land was completely drained and turned over to agriculture. On the other hand, Tel Magadier or Maharin appeared on the 1914 map as towards the end of the former Halik Channel, but east of what may have been a lake that collected water to the southwest of Lake Mareotis. So we took these 2 examples because there is a network of basins that are connecting these channels. And basically from the 5th century onwards, there is some state control over this area that basically put all the water towards the Khalig-Khenes channel to develop all this area so Alexandria could be benefited. And eventually, one of the main branches of the Nile, the Canopic branch, basically got lost.
So let's move to the wine production now. So the western part of the Nile Delta became a major wine producing area for the new Ptolemaic capital city of Alexandria, and perhaps also for export. And since the Pharaonic period, there had been vineyards along the north coast and western side of the delta, and the number of wineries can be estimated by the remains of tanks specifically for wine pressing. And during his study of wine production in the western delta, Dr. Mohammed Kenawi conducted an archaeological survey of numerous sites, and he successfully identified 18 locations that contain architectural remains related to wine presses in the region. And this table highlights some of these sites, with also the datation. And then another scholar with a very difficult surname, Mareotis, conducted another archaeological survey to document the wineries in the Mareotic region through archaeological surveys and the study of remaining artifacts in the area. And the goal of the study was to document the location of these wineries, establish their chronological periods, and analyze remnants of winemaking installations, including trading floors, collection basins, and foundational structures. And the scholar utilized previous archaeological reference and conducted comprehensive field study to verify and detail the sites. And their work provided a clear understanding of wine production activities in the region during the Roman and Byzantine periods, highlighting its economic and social significance in that area. And here is another table with all the wineries she documented. And it is noted that Kenawi dated the wine press to be recorded to a period spanning from the 3rd century BC to the 7th century CE. Meanwhile, Ziertzvika attributed all wine presses to the Roman period, including some that Kenawi had dating with a broader historical range. And this difference may be due to the nature of the surviving remains, where architectural elements from the presses are often isolated and detached from their original archaeological context. And this detachment frequently results from past excavation, which were either unrecorded or poorly documented, so complicating a precise dating. So, however, thanks to the project, our project, we tend to support Kenawi's chronology, suggesting that these presses were luckily also in use during the Ptolemaic period, perhaps even from its earliest phases. And recent discoveries and planting indicate that winemaking was present as early as the site period, so during the first millennium BC. And the structure of the discovered press is generally similar to the models found throughout Mareotis and Western Delta. This is the last. And perhaps also by combining these with the Kilns form wine amphora, like those found in the survey work, but further combining the mapping data, in order to understand the channels that exist in the Western Delta and how the link sites, collection nodes, and ultimately run through to Alexandria, the scale of the wine industry as supply chain to Alexandria can begin to be quantified to some extent. Papyrus data from the Fayum area in Egypt is very rich, but increasing archaeological data can further be analyzed to expand our picture of the waterway networks and how the linked production centers in the Western Delta with the capital and also perhaps further afield to the Eastern Mediterranean. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Covered an awful lot of ground there and painted a picture, I think, of the kind of hidden rivers. We don't have to put on wetsuits or even wellies to find some of these rivers and how complicated it is and the breadth of science that we need. So are there any questions from the floor or back at home?
Just one for me. You've also got lots of evidence of waterways and the administration. Is there any evidence that the waterways are being adapted or changed for manufacturing? There's a administration information related to how they're potentially manipulating waterways to get what they want?
Yeah, one of the things that happened, yes. One of the things that happen in Egypt very often is that they have local initiatives. So it's like a kind of capitalist society, actually, because every single work that they do along the river is a local initiative. So it's like an enterprise. So they modified the small area that they own, but with the Ptolemaic period onwards and the Roman period, basically there is a shift in that behavior. So now the state is controlling more the canals. So what happened in the 5th century with a Roman emperor of the eastern side is that, I think it's called Constantine or something like that. Yeah, we have a lot of emperors, so I really don't know. He actually made a regulation on the canals heading to Alexandria, because the state wanted to control all the production, not only of wine or amphora, but also the flow of the water. So all these basins basically were controlled by the state, regardless of local initiatives, because the local initiatives still existed, but all the flow of the water towards Alexandria actually shifted the flow of the water source to the point that this channel that is called the Canopic was drained and it disappeared. And it was one of the main channels. But the reason of that is because before that, Alexandria was not very important. Alexandria didn't exist. So basically, there was a couple of cities, Damanhur and Naucratis. So those cities were in charge of maintaining the channels in the Canopic branch. But once these cities were like, we don't care anymore.